The people have spoken. We have reached a verdict, or have we? So in my latest video, not latest video, but in one of my past videos in which I was talking about how I felt left out, priced out, and gatekept out of the hobby, particularly for the launch of this edition, I kind of explained, hey, this is not necessarily a criticism of the edition, it's more of a feelings thing, like me explaining how I feel and putting it out there to, just to share some thoughts, to get conversations going. And thank the God Emperor, that's exactly what happened. And we got a huge conversation, at least huge for the standards of my channel. Hey, that's pretty big, okay? That's massive. A massive It's the biggest conversation anyone has ever seen. You can ask anyone. And we got a pretty good conversation going on in the comments. People agreeing with me, people disagreeing with me about all sorts of things. People actually even insulting me, maybe. Which is why today I am wearing my barbarian hat. Because I come to you in the aspect of a warrior. So, watch your words, buddy. Remember, I am a very accomplished hand-to-hand fighter. So I can psychically punch you in the if you get out of line. And I don't care if you have I'll create a and I'll punch it psychically. I would never lay hands on any one of you. I am a being of love. But psychically, I am a being of violence anyways. That's probably like the worst intro I've ever done to any video. But with that being said, welcome to the HobbyGuard. Thank you so much for everyone who commented, good, bad, whatever it is, agree, disagree. As I always say, I can only learn from your comments. And I found it all very interesting, and I was glad to be able to host this. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first comment here is from Jonathan Schmetchel7452. Yeah, you lost me around the 8-minute mark, saying you are being gatekept because you would rather spend the money on something else is asinine. Oh, sorry, I missed a dot. Saying you are gatekept because you would rather spend the money on something else is asinine. If you're trying to work towards a greater point, don't start with that shit as usual. I try not to curse in this channel because I am a slave to the god algorithm machine. So yeah, no, I agree with it. I'm a horrible speaker. I'm not good with words. I'm better with swords. So yeah, fair criticism. That's partly the reason why I started this channel and why I try not to edit my videos, most of my videos, at least not too much, nor do I script them, is because I want to get better at talking. So yeah, fair enough, that's all I can say. But however, to what did you call me? Asinine. That's a big word for a man with such a small dingling right there. Okay, so you get a punch right there in your miniatures for that. Just kidding, okay? Just kidding. Your miniatures have not been psychically touched by me. So next comment here. Mini Cooper 67 says, I held out against FOMO until I found it heavily discounted. For those non-native English speakers, FOMO is a fear of missing out. At least I think that's what it stands for. So yeah, that's smart. I don't know if he's talking about specifically the 11th edition Armageddon launch box set, or just any kit that he wants to buy in general, any box or miniature or whatever it is that he wants to buy in general. That's wise, and in fact I think that is our main defense against FOMO practices. I've criticized a lot GW for FOMO practices. I think they don't make for a healthy consumer slash not creator, but vendor. Their name escapes me right now. But consumer slash provider relationship, I don't think FOMO practices makes it very heavy. It obviously brings in the money, but the most mature people, the most mature consumers kind of take a step back, right? And yeah, developing discipline with your wallet in that sense is very important, and I fully admire that and appreciate it. Okay, we got a two-part comment here from Matt9591 says, the constant FOMO and release of new product that warps the game really demotivates me to hobby up units. Why invest time and money into painting up units I like when they are either going to be made irrelevant or rotated out of the game entirely? I've been getting into historicals lately, and it feels so much better to just hobby up what I like and not chase any sort of meta or rule set. First of all, based. Second of all, goes to what I said with the previous comment, right? That is called just maturity, wisdom. That is awesome. Unfortunately, let's be real here, a lot of the reasons why we autistic nerds fall in love with these fictional universes is because there's a part of us in our brains that is very immature, and we like to feel like kids again. We like to like paint our toy soldiers and have them on display and things like that. But we have to remember we're not kids anymore regardless, so in a sense we have to be the parent to our own inner child, if you will. There's a comment here, a response from YezzyZek9818. This is really my biggest obstacle. I used to love to just bought and collect. I assume he wanted to say buy and collect my favorite army, knowing it will be good in some edition. Now it's a decision of is this with the price when I assume he meant worth the price, when it may not be around next edition, when it won't be painted and ready to use before the nerf. The last 5 years at least, my motivation for the hobby has dwindled, as I just can't stay in the hobby and they left behind. Won't get that, so now it's irrelevant, and that's just happened way too much lately. Okay, between my dyslexia and the spelling errors here, I might have messed up your comment, but yeah, I agree with the spirit of it for sure. Me personally, I don't care about the meta. To me, again, going back to chess, like, if you care about meta, just get into chess, read the chess books, learn the London opening and the Scandinavian opening and all the weird variations and the Carl Kong and the whatever's. If you're into that sort of thing, there's nothing wrong with that. It only means that you're boring. But if you like cool freaking space crusader soldiers with big freaking rifles and bigger freaking swords and axes that are fighting big evil space elves, sadistic elf chicks, and they're also god, and they wanna, torture you for all eternity so that their souls don't fall into the claws of their devious, perverted god. If you're into that, then, well, yeah, you're gonna get into something like Warhammer. So yeah, that's kind of the issue with it. Not gonna lie, I kind of lost the track a little with that description of the Drukhari. But yeah, I guess what I was going to is I care more about the fluff than about the meta and the rules and like how powerful a unit really is. Obviously, I like in my head to get into the strategist chair, the captain chair, and kind of try to make tactical decisions, but to me it's more about the narrative, I have to admit. Bagel Mensk says, I jumped out of 10th, but the detachment flexibility of 11th makes me hopeful that I can make core out of my existing collection without buying into anything new. I think make more out of, I think that's what he meant. And yeah, I agree, that's one of the changes that I praised for 11th edition. I obviously haven't played 11th edition, but the idea of the modular detachments, that is something that interests me, because again, my brain is a machine, an autistic machine that creates stories out of everything. So the idea of like, oh, maybe this unit from this detachment or from this company was lost in the battlefield, and this other unit of like outriders or whatever kind of came to rescue them, and that's why you have two units, whatever. That is very like there's a lot of potential for narrative, or for my Dark Angels, right, where you have like your first company, your Raven Wing, well, you have your Death Wing, your Raven Wing, and your so-called Green Wing. That is also very cool. It offers a lot of possibilities, and yeah, that's certainly a change that I praised. Honestly, I didn't know too much about like the game before. I guess I got into the hobby in 9th edition strictly. I mean, a bit early, but more strictly into the hobby when I finally started buying my miniatures. It was in 9th edition, so when 10 came around, I was excited about the idea of the detachments. And the idea of some factions getting like, their own specific detachments. It just turned out to be a bit more big brain than this small brain. could handle, and it felt more restrictive in some way. But anyways, I agree. The flexibility of detachments in 11th certainly looks very fun. Of course, that comes with new challenges as well, right? I do like the thing that they did where, again, I haven't played it, but in concept, in theory, where you have to choose your disposition, I think they call it, whether you're like an attacker or a defender, or you're like doing a recon mission or a whatever, and that will determine your primaries and secondaries, and that will interact differently. I think that sounds very complex, but as long as it's printed out clearly in the rules and there's charts that make it all clear, I can get behind that, because that does sound fun. Again, 11th edition is very young and I have not gotten my hands on it. I guess I could get it on my phone, technically, but I haven't gotten my hands on it, and it might not be as good as it sounds, but I think it offers some potential, for sure. Ryan IRL 2398 says, the price alone... Should I just stop saying the numbers after the name? Is that like a thing? I'm not very good at this, obviously, but are we supposed to just ignore the numbers? Maybe I should, but what if the numbers after the name are important to the person? Anyways, Ryan IRL says, the price alone is more than enough to never play it. That's like your opinion, dude. No, that's great. Honestly, I got nothing against that, but again, I think that's a personal opinion thing. I've seen people pay a lot more for a lot less in terms of other hobbies. I do think that the practices are sometimes scummy in the company. I think that the company does not is not very honest sometimes or forthcoming about their actual like practices, but I've criticized that at length in other videos. But realistically, like, whatever money I do end up spending on miniatures, as hard as it is sometimes to part with it does bring me a lot of joy. It's not so much like the company is keeping that joy alive with what they're producing now. It's more so like they're standing on the shoulders of giants of like years and years of lore that, you know, I can get really lost into and that I've grown with and I really like. But yeah, that'll vary person to person, right? So if the price alone is not good for you, you know, there's alternatives out there. I would still invite you to try out the hobby, even if you start with a lower priced thing. To me, it's hard to say, because to me, I'm kind of alone, not alone, entirely alone, but I'm kind of an outlier in this regard, because to me, Warhammer is the lore. To me, what I am paying for, what I'm paying the company for, is like the lore, the entire universe that it exists on. Sorry, there are many interesting indie games out there, indie war games that are coming out, but they just don't have, like, for example, books and years of lore that I can get lost into. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. I think we still have to support them. I support some Kickstarters with what little money I can, even though I'll likely never have time to play them, but because I like the idea of people creating that. I like the idea of Games Workshop not having a monopoly on war games, on tabletop games, and that's why I applaud, and I've talked a lot about how I really like what One Page Rules is doing. But anyways, the point is that unfortunately the market will decide whether the price is right. At the end of the day, that's why you have like soccer players and football players earning millions, while sometimes firefighters struggle to pay rent. ABXDPA says 3D printer goes brrrr. And yeah, I agree, absolutely. I agree to an extent. However, I am one of those people that, first of all, I would never shame someone for like coming to play with their 3D printed models. Me personally, like, why would I do that? Me personally, it's different if you're like a Games Workshop employee or a Games Workshop shield or whatever, or like a paid marketeer for Games Workshop. I understand that, but you know, by all means, like, for all I care, you can play with, like, you know, those plastic toy soldiers or with little bottle caps. I really don't mind that as much, unless you're like entering a more serious setting where like you're playing with someone who says, hey, I'm gonna try to have a narrative game and the models have to follow like these rules based in the lore or whatever. But that's you more of agreeing to enter a particular dynamic with the other player, right? More akin to a D&D campaign, if you will. However, there is a certain peace of mind, like someone like with my small brain, for example, someone like me with my small tiny brain will sometimes rather pay more money so that they have to do less things and less thinking. Mind you, that doesn't apply to Games Workshop because their products are sometimes so complex. Like you have to buy them, but there's different types. Okay, if you don't believe me, just try explaining to someone who doesn't know about Warhammer. Try explaining to them like how they can get into the hobby. It's not easy. I've tried that a lot, and my friends' heads and family members' heads just start like spinning a bit. So yeah, sometimes there is the convenience aspect of it that people are actually paying that much more for. That being said, I still think it's extremely expensive. 21 Akuri says, everyone here needs to be illuminated. I'm not sure what he is referring to particularly, but I will say I agree that sometimes conversations online, literally about anything, about absolutely anything, can get a bit too extreme, a bit too out there. People can get a bit too heated. And you know, I won't get into why I believe the reason for that is. It's a long conversation for another video, for a different time. However, I will say keep chill, guys, you know, keep chill. The other day my friend at work was telling me that apparently people have, how can I put this, deleted each other from this existence over Pokemon cards. Like, bro, that's not what the God Emperor intended for us, okay? The Bible says that Pokemon are there to fight for humans, not humans are there to fight for Pokemon, okay? So don't turn things around. Let's get things straight. Let's reorganize our priorities as a civilization, as a species, and let's get those silly, stupid mutant Pokemon to fight and die for our whims once again. I'm tired of these things, humans fighting over Pokemons. That is heresy. That is nonsense. And I shall not have it. Anno6969. Hehe, Anno. Hehe. Sorry, in my language, that's in High Gothic, that's a funny name. He says, oh man, I've also been gatekept out of having a Ferrari. Damn, bro, you too? Me too, man. No. I know. We should make a clan of people who have been gatekept out of buying Ferraris. Ferrari's kind of lame, not gonna lie though. It's just not fair. You do not have a right to ownership. The rules are free, FFS. You already have models, so what's the problem? I may have not done a good job of explaining what my problem was. My problem was more like me feeling overwhelmed with not one thing, but all the little things that have been adding up that just made me feel kind of unwelcome not on the hobby and not by hobbyists, but like here's the thing. I'll open to you a little secret about how sometimes companies operate, because I've been in some, I have had access, you know, I've looked through the window at some big earning companies making some decisions, and they usually make them based on, no, not usually, this is, you know, in a different time, in a different place, but I did keep this experience with me. They have like this idea of their customer. They create this avatar in their head of who the perfect customer is, and they target that person. What I was saying in my video, and I may not have done a great job of doing it because I am just a silly, stupid barbarian, was that as much as I love this universe, as much as I love these stupid plastic miniatures and models and toy soldiers, and as much as like money and time as I've invested, every year that goes by, I feel more and more different to that target customer, which, as I said many times in the video, is not a criticism, you know? Maybe I'm just getting old. Maybe I'm just outgrowing the hobby. Maybe it's just time to, like, I don't know, get into gardening and growing tomatoes with my Mexican hands as my ancestors intended that I do. But these hands are literally made to grow tomatoes. Maybe it's time for me to do that y que mis ancestros me perdonen por usar su nombre para hacer un chiste. TEPM Army, I think, says, see this as a positive I have. Oh, speaking like, see this as a positive? Oh, sorry, I thought he was like doing a Yoda voice, like, see this as a positive I have. No, see this as a positive I have. There's a whole world out there. That Yoda voice was really terrible. I apologize. As a former Star Wars fan, I should have done better. There's a whole world out there of other miniature games that are waiting for you to try. and I replied something, and then he replied again. Well, I guess I should read out what I replied. Honestly, there are so many indie games I'd like to try. Unfortunately, most would have to be solo for the time being. And he said, I'm the same for the most part, but there's lots of games that cater to solo play. And he gives some very fine examples of which I've read about in different websites and seen in other YouTube channels talked about, like this amazing YouTube channel name, which I keep forgetting, but it's one of like my favorite hobby YouTube channels. I don't feel bad about me forgetting the name because his channel is huge. And I also give him money to support his projects because he has like some games. And I still forget his name. But anyways, the point is, yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something I haven't been able to get quite into as much because Warhammer has a massive anchor. It has an Ursus claw. You know how in the Horus Heresy, the Conqueror and some of the titans and ships for the world leaders had Ursus claws and they could like shoot them at other ships and just yank on them. That's my heart. Like, I'm just a poor sheep, not a sheep, but a void ship, a void vessel. And Games Workshop is the World Eater, and they shot an Ursus claw, and they're yanking on my heart, on the nostalgia, on the love that I have for this universe, for these characters, for these miniatures, for everything that I've gone through in my life, whilst being accompanied by these amazing stories and good memories, you know, with friends and so on. So yeah, it's hard. However, I now have a great excuse to try those games out, called the HobbyGuard. It's a silly little YouTube channel that I've been investing a lot more time than my wife is happy with. And yeah, I have a great excuse to try that stuff out. So I appreciate the comment and I appreciate the suggestions. I would love to get into those. Obviously, not as much people will watch those videos as they would watch the Warhammer ones, because that's just how it is. But I don't care. People have to start putting out content out there about like more indie games. And there's a lot of content out there, so, you know, I can just join the trend, I suppose. It's not a trend yet, but I can do my part, let's say. That Legit says, seriously, nothing changed. It's your hobby, and you can still go for discount retailers, Battle Force discounts, used models, and bash your own or even 3D print. So what if you can't buy the latest box? The rules are even free now. Back in my day, we had to get everything from dodgy pirate sites. Games Workshop released a PDF with the templates that they are selling, so you can print at home for free, or cut out cereal boxes with the measurements. The hobby is the cheapest it's ever been. And then Ordo Malius says, bro, they gave 75% discount and still made a profit. They overpriced as hell, especially when you see how much stuff you get from other games. And yeah, I agree. Other games have like way more accessible options. But I also agree with that Legit. There are a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but there are some things that Games Workshop has been doing to actually make the hobby more accessible. And I've praised them for it. And I've appreciated it. I think like the rules going free, I think they might be free online now. I think that's a great thing. You having to buy your codex and so on, well, it is what it is. But yeah, I think at least like the core rule set, the core rule book going free, I think that's a great thing. At the same time, you get some other shenanigans going, like, hey, I bought the combat patrol rules. Not me personally, I'm just a hypothetical human, hypothetical moron costumer who didn't know any better than to trust Games Workshop with anything. And be like, hey, I bought the combat patrol rules and this doesn't have the combat patrol rules. There's also things like that. Or things like, hey, I bought the Armageddon 11th edition box set that supposedly has the core rules in it, and 2 weeks in, they're gonna be not relevant anymore because you have to fix things already, or they're actually not the complete version of the core rules. So I still have to go out of my way and buy another book or get it free or whatever. See, that's my point. It's confusing. Listen, I get into a lot of these things. I read the community posts sometimes in Warhammer, like I'm subscribed to their newsletter, I watch videos of other people talking about it, and I'm confused. Granted, I am only a silly barbarian, So apologies if I'm not big brain like some of you. All I'm saying is it's a bit more complicated than it probably had to be. As for the pricing, no, yeah, bro, it's expensive. There's no listen, dude. I work selling hydraulic equipment basically, and doing more with like working on it and assembling things like that. But it is incredibly expensive, and I understand that sometimes you'll sell a brass part that for whatever reason is a bit more expensive than a stainless steel part, and you're like, hey, but shouldn't stainless steel be more expensive than brass? Well, yeah, but not always. Sometimes the thread that is in a certain specific like hydraulic adapter is like so fine, and the thread pitch has to be so precise that all that work that goes into it actually makes it more expensive. Or perhaps it's a part made here in Canada instead of in China or Australia or whatever, that also makes it more expensive. Little things like that add up the price. So I understand to an extent that sometimes things might seem like pricier than they should be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are, and that the company is making a huge profit. That being said, I do think Games Workshop is making a huge profit. Next, I'll stop commenting so much on the very last comments because I don't want this video to be so long that it's unwatchable, but I'll just read this one here because it's kind of a good vibes comment. Rip Shy Guy says, the change from 10th to 11th edition rule-wise is the least changes we've seen from one edition to another, and they raised the points of pretty much all units across the board, which I did not know. Therefore, you can buy less units to play on the board and still reach 500, 1000, 2000, etc. Lore-wise, they're going to continually change with the world evolving. A lot of old lore was far sillier and more comedy than actual Grimdark, and if you're casually playing, you should be fine kit bashing all you want. I agree models are expensive, though thankfully 3D printing is much more accessible. I agree, and thank you. That actually makes me a bit more motivated, and the fact that there's, still hobbyists out there that are like, hey, no, it's fine, like, we're still here, we're still making our own hobby out of things. I think that's nice. I think that's in many ways what I needed to hear, or what I needed to read, if you will. Now, the fact about the old lore being sillier, I also agree. There are many, and I commented in that video, actually, I said there's things in the lore, that old lore, that was like very stupid. It doesn't go very well with the cohesive, more mature, more narrative story that you have going on like decades after. So all those lore changes, instead of making female custodies for no stupid freaking reason, how about you just fix the old lore that didn't make sense? And then create new female characters, for sure, as many as you want, I don't care. Anyways, Stonelord says, I mean, why even buy these stupid overpriced figurines if that's a barrier? Just use whatever tokens and say they're whatever. Yay and nay. It depends, right? It depends what type of hobbyist you are. If you read the rules of Warhammer 40,000, 11th edition, or whichever edition, and you're like, oh my dear God Emperor, this is the cleanest, coolest, hardest game. Like, not hard in the sense of like complicated, but hard as in like it goes hard. I definitely need to play it even if it's with rocks right now. Then yeah, of course, I agree. Why not? Me, it's the opposite. I read the rules and I'm like, it kind of sounds cool, I guess, but to me it's not cool until I have my miniature there. And it's like, okay, my miniature is gonna charge, and then do this, and then do that, and then you get to fight back or whatever, and then we're gonna do 5-6 rolls on the same shooting turn just to see what happens where. Like, I cannot go through all of that unless, again, my barbarian, autistic, stupid, small brain has the idea and is the constant reminder of, oh, these are Space Marines, Space Marines are cool. I'm a simple man, I'm sorry. If I had to choose, if you put a gun to my head, it would do nothing because I have a sick freaking helmet. But if I didn't have a sick freaking helmet and you put a gun to my head, it would do nothing because I am trained in the art of disarming people with guns to my head. But if I had my hands tied and you put a gun to my head and said, hey, HobbyGuard, you can only choose one. Either you only collect miniatures and never play Warhammer, or never collect miniatures but you get to play Warhammer with whatever you want. I would 100 times out of 100 choose to collect the miniatures. I guess that depends on the person. I'm more of like a creative. I like art, I like modeling, I like painting, I like that sort of the aspect of the hobby, and the playing is secondary to me. That's completely personal. That's not a criticism of the rules or of Games Workshop. And finally, this will have to be the final comment. There are more comments online on the video, and there are all insightful and all great, and I thank everyone who left a comment. But again, this video can only be so long, so I will read this one last. Laszlo Varga says, as for the modeling and the prices, isn't it more that your living environment priced you out of that part of the hobby? You've mentioned the Canadian prices, so I checked out other manufacturer products in Canadian shops, and then he proceeds to give some prices. Some are like accurate towards what I've seen in my local shops. Some are cheaper, some are more expensive actually, but it varies. The more expensive, in either case, a random medical expense / car repair, etc. will take away the money from the hobby, and is not unique to 40k. And yeah, one can spend the same money to other stuff that seems to be more worth it because it's bigger. Example given, the gym equipment, but it's just a question of which pastime activity does someone prefer that at that given moment. If they enjoy building, painting more than lifting, then they'll value the Armageddon box more than the equipment. Yay and nay. In a way, you're obviously right. And that's what I said there, right? Like it's hard. The way one time a hobby store manager sold me on the biggest box set I've ever bought. He said, yes, it seems like an expensive hobby at first, but you don't realize, like, when you buy these, all the hours of entertainment that you're gonna get out of these, right? And fair enough. I have not yet, after years, finished painting all those miniatures, and I'm entertained by painting them and all that stuff. I guess what I was more going towards is, I think it's undeniable. And you can see here in the comments, you know, some people say, hey, it's not that expensive, and someone literally just called me broke, as literally, because I couldn't afford it, and I literally said, no, I can afford it. I just, it was perhaps a silly argument, like, why should I have to choose between this and that? Like, obviously, we'll have to choose what to spend our money, and that was not perhaps my brightest moment. But what I was going to is, let me show you a picture, maybe that'll make it clearer. That puny sorceress that you can see there on screen was my girlfriend at the time, and she's now my wife. And she literally dragged me into the hobby store and bought me my first set of Warhammer miniatures. Because, sorry, I didn't mean to zoom in her legs, it was the Shieldbreaker Strike Force, which I painted as my Blood Angels that I have back there. Absolute queen, I know. I did pay her back, obviously, but she had access to credit and I didn't have access to credit. Now, at that time, we lived in a different country, and she's my wife now. And by the time I finished paying my primer, my tools for painting, my very basic kit of paints that you saw in that video, and my miniature, like, by the time I finished paying that off, all of that off, it was more than half of what I had earned that entire month in a full-time job. And not a terribly bad paying full-time job. Like, I was earning over minimum wage in my country, right? That's what I mean when I say that was an irresponsible purchase. That makes it irresponsible. It was easier because I had access to credit via my wife, well, girlfriend at the time. But that's what I'm trying to say. Why does it have to feel... Let me put this into perspective. Forget it's called Warhammer. Forget you ever heard anything about Warhammer. Why does it have to feel so irresponsible of me to buy little plastic toy soldiers? I understand the quality is great, I understand all those things, but I still think that they are quite a bit overpriced. It will be different if you can buy that box set and that's all that you're ever gonna need to play those very first few games of Warhammer. But that is a lie, and Games Workshop knows it. And I assume you know it because you seem like a fairly knowledgeable person in this topic. But again, I certainly have a lot more to learn about, like, this particular hobby. A lot more, and I appreciate, like, I've been looking into it, you know. And I want to get more into it. I'm more attracted to some other universes than others. So I'll definitely try out, like, new games apart from Warhammer. By the way, I saw some people commenting Kill Team. I don't have time to access, like respond to every comment. But I saw some people commenting about Kill Team and what a good alternative it is. I agree. So far, like, I've played some Kill Team and I had a lot of fun. I enjoy it a lot. I like Kill Team. But I also like to move big armies. If only every damn turn didn't take forever. But anyways, at the end of the day, it's a preference thing. That's why I said, like, this is not a criticism of the company. This is not a criticism of how people enjoy the hobby. This is just me feeling left out. Now, I do take issue with people saying, like, oh, investing in gym equipment or a gym membership or whatever, instead of buying like something for fun, that should, in my opinion, again, should not be that expensive. That's your decision. Yes, it totally is. But I think it's also my responsibility to stay healthy. I don't necessarily do exercise out of love every time. I don't do exercise out of like aesthetic choice, like I want to look this way or whatever necessarily every time. I have some health issues, and I've been having more and more. I have a lot of past injuries, unfortunately, from all my battles that I fought in the past. And to me, it's kind of like a life or death situation, in a sense, right? I'm not gonna die from not doing exercises, but my life will be so horrible, so unlivable, that I might as well, right? If I was not able to do any sort of exercise. And the fact of the matter is, I think a healthy, and I've said this a bunch in this channel, a healthy hobbyist makes for a healthy hobby. And I think everyone should get into a more healthy lifestyle. Look at me, I'm not jacked, okay? I used to be stronger, to be honest. I've been dealing with some health issues which have prevented me from doing as much exercise as I should. But I'll get back on the horse as soon as I can. But my point is, to me that's not an argument. To me that's like, it's your choice to have fun or eat. You know, like, no, it's not your choice to eat. Everyone needs to eat. I think everyone needs to do exercise. I don't think there's an excuse for that. I don't shame people for not exercising, because it's hard sometimes. For some people it's harder than for others, and some people have more accessibility to it than others. But I think it's a human right, and if you're a married man, I think it's your duty to be physically strong, to be able to carry your wife and your family, if you have one, out of a burning building if you have to. And I'm not one of those like, oh, let's go to the Alpha University retirement camp kind of. No. I'm just talking about like have some self-respect as a man. Get in shape enough that you're able to defend your loved ones or protect them if you have to, or at least help them carry the groceries. If you're like me and have a job that sometimes gets like fairly physical, or you have to I don't know, just being stronger and in shape opens a lot of like options professionally as well. But don't listen to me for advice, for professional advice or economical financial advice. I'm just a silly barbarian. So with that being said, thank you everyone who commented. Again, there's a lot more comments, but I realize this video is a bit longer than I wanted it to be, perhaps because I cannot stop yapping so much. But thank you for coming and for staying till the end of the video. Remember, ad astra, and as always, there are no female custodies.